Dark Arts FC committed just 5 fouls all night, enjoyed 77% of the possession and handed starts to a bunch of kids, including a 16-year-old goalkeeper. What on earth has happened to us? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. On today's episode, we're going to look back on the 5-1 victory over Bolton Wanderers. We'll discuss the club's youngest ever starter, Ethan Nwaneri's brace, Raheem Sterling's first start, those I'd rather have not seen play, and more. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Hey everybody, how are you doing? Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Welcome back to another live podcast on which we'll be reviewing Arsenal's 5-1 victory over Bolton Wanderers. It was really, really nice last night, wasn't it? To watch a game and to kind of attend a game whereby you never felt any stress. And, you know, you looked at the fixture and on paper it was certainly one that we were strong favourites to win. And, you know, as a result of that, you kind of, you turn up there with an expectation, but also feeling somewhat relaxed. You still have to then go out on the pitch and do it. You still have to go out on the pitch and make it happen. And Mikel Arteta made an interesting team selection, I think. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I just wanted to make that point that after the long old week that we had, a week in which we went to Spurs, Atalanta, and then Manchester City, I don't know about you, but I really, really needed this. I really, really needed a night where I could turn up at the Emirates. I couldn't put my feet up literally because I was working, but I could sit back, I could enjoy the game, I could focus on players that I normally don't get the opportunity to focus on, and I could try and develop some perhaps more informed views and opinions around some of those youngsters and some of the players that we see as the future of our football club. We are, of course, through to the fourth round of the Carabao Cup, and we will travel to Deepdale to take on Preston North End in the next round, and that tie will take place at the end of October. We'll touch on the draw in a little bit more detail a little bit later on in the show. If I could just ask, though, if you are with us on YouTube, leave a like on the video. It really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. That helps as well. And if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review. I got to start today's pod with a kind of little anecdote, a little story about my experience at Emirates Stadium last night. So I was out from the morning yesterday. I had a really, really busy, long old day. And I hate those days where I have work during the day and then work during the night. It's almost like a kind of double shift. And the reason I hate it is not because I hate my job. I love my job. I'm extremely privileged to be able to do it. But the thing that I hate most is having to carry around and lug around this massive old box with my radio kit in it to other jobs. And when you get on the tube with a box that looks like it could have something sinister in it, you get funny looks. People stare at you. People often ask you what's in the box, and you have to explain it's a radio broadcast kit, and you know I'm a football reporter, and hence why I've got it with me, and I'm off to work later, and that's why I'm carrying it around. So there's that, first of all, which I absolutely do not have the time for and cannot be bothered for, like some random old guy coming up to me and saying, or first of all, no, let me correct you, or let me correct myself. First of all, they stare at you really funnily and weirdly for about 10 minutes, and then they go, what's in the box? Huh? What's in the box? And then you have to explain. And then you find yourself explaining, and other people in the carriage are like also looking over, like trying to hear, like, what's in the box? Like it's really, really important to their lives. Like, it's just, yeah, it irritates me lugging that thing around. So I try to avoid that at all costs, but sometimes I can't. But when I arrived at the stadium, I went in and I got myself a cup of coffee, which I was desperately in need of at that point in the day. I made my way through the media room and out into the stadium and made my way towards my broadcast position. And a lot of you have come and said hello to me while I've been working in the past, so you know exactly where I'm talking about, just behind the tunnel, just behind the away dugout, right there. So I'm making my way over and I'm like fed up, and I'm carrying this box and it's chucking it down with rain as well. And I'm soaked because I've just walked from Finsbury Park Station in the rain to the Emirates Stadium, and I go up and I get there and I turn up at the desk, and there's a load of bags on my desk where I'm supposed to be setting up. Now, when you're setting up those kits, particularly if you're doing a bigger broadcast, two of you, commentator, co-commentator, etc., you are going to take up more space. And while you're unboxing everything and setting it all up and plugging it in, it is natural that you're going to put stuff right and left, and you're going to go into your position, into someone else's position. And it's fine. I'm not the kind of guy to kick up a stink about that. I got there, I saw there was a ton of bags on my desk, and I thought, let me go and say hello to my mate. And by the time I come back, it'll be fine, and I'll set up. So I get back to my desk, and the person who was setting up has completely disappeared now. However, they've still left their stuff where I'm supposed to be setting up. They've left a massive suitcase that I can only assume was housing their equipment on the desk, and they've walked off. So I come back and I'm like, for God's sake. So I pick up this bag and I move it to the left so that I can start setting up my kit. Anyway, midway through setting up my kit, I'm doing the sound checks and testing it all and all the rest of it. And this guy comes up the steps with a hat on like this, with a flat cap on, face down. I didn't recognize him at first, didn't work out who he was straight away. And he comes up and he sort of squeezes past me in the row and goes and sits on literally the seat next to me. Literally the seat next to me. Now, you know what seats are like in football stadiums. They're not any different in the media section. They're just as tight and just as close together. And then I hear him speak. I'm minding my own business now. I'm looking down on my desk. I'm setting up the kit, and I hear him speak, and I go, I know that voice from somewhere. And I turn to my left, and you're not going to believe who it was. Now, older supporters, because we're going back probably 16 years now, I'm talking about around about the 2008-2009 period. We developed quite the rivalry with Hull City. They were like the Bolton Wanderers of their time. Ironic, given that's who we faced last night. Surely you remember their boss, Phil Brown. He used to wear a kind of Sam Allardyce-style headset, has never shied away from the fact that he quite enjoyed trying to put a spanner in our works, and he famously accused Cesc Fabregas, if you remember, of spitting at his assistant, Brian Horton. You know the guy I'm talking about. Now, at that point, I disliked Phil Brown quite a lot. And I was young, I was 18 years old. I was a much more unreasonable football fan than I am today, and I was very tribal, and I'll be the first to admit that. And it isn't a good thing the way I was back then. I'm not saying that. I know that at times I probably took it too far and probably got much angrier than was ever really warranted for what was happening. But we developed a bit of a rivalry with them, and he was one of my least favourite managers on the circuit. I could not stand Phil Brown. I could not stand the way he spoke, the way that, in my opinion at the time, he thought he was someone much bigger than he actually was, and I didn't like that whole City team and the way they went about things, etc., etc. But he's a really nice guy, and it kind of kills me to say that. We spoke for ages, and it's amazing how, you know, when you meet people that you have a preconception of, very quickly that opinion can change. There's Arsenal legends that I've had the I'm going to say it, the misfortune of working with in recent times, that when I was growing up I absolutely adored, and I now think they're some of the biggest idiots on the planet. If I'm being honest and frank about things. Phil Brown really impressed me. We had a good chat. We spoke about that time. We spoke about those infamous Arsenal Hull City clashes, the incident involving Cesc Fabregas, and he was just really honest, and it was a really cool conversation. I never thought I'd ever say that about Phil Brown, but yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. Let's say a few hellos to those of you in the I nearly said in the dive chat. Is that the dark arts like taking over my mind rather than live? I'm thinking about dive. Anyway, good morning to Afzar, to Tom, to Glenn, to Matt, to Fizzy, to Black Halo Man, to Sammy Guna. Richie's with us as well. Richie says, it was the man on the train. When I was talking about who it was, Ray Beam said, please let it be Bentner. Sorry to disappoint you. Scott says, happy Thursday evening. How good was Ethan coming to you live from Melbourne? Great to see you in the live chat, mate. Gunner329 says, it sounds like the film Seven. We've got Hacker, we've got PW in the chat as well. I mean, last night's game, as I've already kind of explained, was a really chilled one and really relaxed one for me. I didn't feel any stress at any point. I didn't feel any nerves really at any point. And as I say, it was exactly what the doctor ordered. Let's talk, though, first and foremost about the starting 11 that Mikel Arteta picked. Now, if I go back to the starting 11 that I suggested going into this game, there were a few similarities. I'm pretty sure I put Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. I definitely picked the centre-back pairing of Kivior and Calafiori. I thought that was the right way to go. There was, of course, in the midfield, I think I went with Jorginho, Rice and Nwaneri, which was, again, exactly what Mikel went with. I said to you guys at the time that it was Partey or Rice. It had to be because we're just so short of options at the minute. And given Partey's history versus Declan Rice's, you know which one you feel that you can probably push that little bit harder. And so Declan Rice got the nod. I went with... I think I went with Sterling, Martinelli and Jesus as my front three, but I did say, and I was saying this in the office yesterday and people were laughing at me, that Bukayo Saka could play, that was a real possibility given that, of course, he had only played a half against City at the weekend. So, yeah, I wasn't massively shocked by the lineup. I know a lot of people maybe looking from the outside in were saying, oh my God, that's a really strong Arsenal team. I think it was strong in areas. I think the front three was very strong. I think the midfield was strong too. The defence was where we were lacking a little bit. 16-year-old Jack Porter becoming Arsenal's youngest ever starter. Not debutant, and it's important to distinguish between the two. He's not the youngest player ever to represent Arsenal, but he's the youngest player ever to start a game, which is still quite some record to have. Josh Nichols played at right back. I didn't think that was going to happen. I've got to be honest. I thought that one of Ben White or Jurrien Timber would be available. It turns out none of them were available. And they're both doubts going into the weekend as well, which isn't great news. Lewis Skelly, I thought, deserved to play at left back. I think, he was one of the players that impressed me most last night. And we'll talk about that in a bit. The midfield, Jorginho, Rice and Ethan Nwaneri. We knew that Ethan Nwaneri was going to start. This was always a game, I think, that was earmarked for him. He, of course, was the face of the game as far as Arsenal's socials were concerned as well. So you always knew that he was going to start the game. And then the Bukayo Saka thing was probably a bit of a debate. He got the nod. Jesus, of course, played through the middle, and Raheem Sterling got his first start for Arsenal. Let's talk then about some of these performances. Let's get into some of these displays, because there's a lot of opinions floating around, and that's always the case after an Arsenal game. We're a huge football club, high-profile football club. There's a lot of interest in everything that we do, and so everything is going to be scrutinised, and everything is going to be over-analysed. I think the one thing I'm very, very wary of, and the trap that I don't want to fall into, the trap that I want to avoid, is going too big on Jack Porter's performance. I think I tweeted something last night when I got home from the game. Must have been very late at night, so I can't remember it. Let me just bring it up on my phone just to refresh my memory. But what I said last night, I think, really, really does still resonate even today. Like, it feels like, sometimes you can put an opinion out there and over time maybe you either soften on that opinion or it slightly changes. I think the way I felt about Jack Porter's performance and the whole story around him starting and becoming Arsenal's youngest ever starter is exactly the same today as it was then. Nothing has changed. I said, what a night for Jack Porter, Arsenal's youngest ever starter. Playing in goal for this club at 16 years old is just incredible. I'm not going to overanalyze his performance or certain actions in the game. What's the point? Whatever way you look at it, it's bloody amazing. And that's exactly how I feel about this today as well. You can sit there and you can talk about the pass that he played, that sort of ricocheted off of the defender, and fortunately for him, went over the bar, I think. You can talk about the fact that he came for a corner in the first half and he got something on it, but probably not enough. So were there a couple of nervy moments from Jack Porter? Of course there were, but it's to be expected, guys. He's 16 years old. 16 years old. When I think about what I was doing at 16 years old, it is mind-blowing that he has started for Arsenal in a competitive game for the first team. It's just an incredible achievement. And I don't think the nuances of certain actions in the game or the over-analysis that we can sometimes, or in fact always want to deliver, I don't think it's relevant in this case. And so I wouldn't want to sit there and say, I think he could have done this better, I think he could have done that better, because I just think it's completely unfair. What an occasion for his family. What an occasion for him. What an experience. He's probably gone to school this morning, which is funny, isn't it? It's just mad. But yeah, Mikel Arteta told us in the radio interviews after the game that he had told him the day before that he was going to be starting, or that was the plan, and it had been a kind of whirlwind experience for Jack Porter since learning that, and then obviously getting the nod. Now, reading a little bit about him on the Athletics website yesterday, I'm not going to profess to know everything about Jack Porter. He's a player that was on my radar, yes, because I looked at the squad, but wasn't someone I knew a great deal about, so I wouldn't sit here and pretend I did. But reading what we were reading, we heard that he was training with the team since pre-season, that he's held in very, very high regard at the football club, that his distribution is something that the club have been really, really impressed by. At 16 years old, obviously he's got a lot to learn still, and he's probably going to develop quite a bit over the coming years. But obviously they felt that, this was something that, they wanted to do or felt semi-comfortable in doing, but B, it's something that circumstances dictated had to happen. And I don't think you should shy away from that, right? It's not a slight on Jack Porter that he's that far down the pecking order, because the guy's 16 years old, as I keep saying. Setford would have played, I'm sure. Nygaard might have played as well. Those two guys would have been ahead of Porter in the pecking order had they been available. They weren't. Obviously, Neto cup tied as well. So, it's worked out nicely for the young man, but he's still got to take that opportunity with both hands. And the fact that there is that trust, and yeah, to a point, the club were backed into a corner and Mikel Arteta didn't have a great deal of choice. But at the same time, there's no point in crying about that and worrying about that as a manager. You just kind of have to embrace it, and you have to try and instill a confidence into the young man and hope that he can go out and repay the faith that you've shown in him. Sometimes, pressure can cause people to wilt, and some people thrive on it. And I know this isn't the same thing, but I'm one of those people that if I'm under pressure, if I've got deadlines, if I know I've got to do something, and there's no messing around, I'm a lot more productive than if you leave me to my own devices and say, there isn't really a deadline, just kind of get on with it. So I like that pressure. I like to maybe not know about stuff. Like, for example, I've got a very exciting commentary gig coming up very soon. You'll hear about it when it comes to it. But I'm really, really excited about this commentary gig that I've got coming up. And I've known about it now for probably about a week and a half. And in a weird way, I'd kind of prefer to find out about these things later, because then you don't sit there and overthink it and think, shit, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. Now, obviously, the positive side, and the same would apply to Jack Porter, is that the longer you have to prepare. But sometimes to just be thrust in without having that time to overthink and overanalyze what may or may not happen can be a good thing as well. And it's a real true test of your character. And it's a real true test, I think, of where you are. So he'll be delighted. He'll be buzzing. He'll be gutted that he didn't keep the clean sheet. I've seen some people analysing his part in that goal, saying that he kind of started to come out, then hesitated. And there's probably some validity to that point, and it's probably fair analysis. But as I've said already, with regards to this young man, I don't really want to sort of dive into every single nuance of every single action that he was involved in. So I'm just going to say it's unlucky. I do think the way that Bolton carved us open was probably more concerning than anything that Jack Porter was involved in. So that's probably where the blame should be, really. But yeah, great to see him get his moment under the lights. And And yeah, he'll be buzzing and he'll be desperate for more. Sometimes you have to give someone a taste of something, don't you? And that can be the best motivation. You get a feel for what something could be like. It gives you that kind of drive, doesn't it, to go on and hopefully achieve that in the long run. Just a quick reminder, guys, if you haven't left a like on the video, please do so. It really, really does help. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, as I mentioned to you guys yesterday, in the transfer of our podcast out of the network that it was previously a part of, we seem to have lost some of our Apple Podcast reviews. I have no idea why. I've contacted Apple Podcasts, but I haven't got a response, and I probably never will. So if you have already left a review on Apple Podcasts and you're sitting there thinking, well, I've already done it, I don't need to do it again, could I ask that you please try it and do it again? Because we really, really need them. It really, really does help. It makes the world of difference. So, yeah, I'd really, really appreciate that. Just a quick reminder as well that this podcast is brought to you at the minute by the good people over at NordVPN. It's the best damn VPN service out there. It's not a product that I'm just throwing in your faces. It's a product that I use. It's something that is a big part of my internet surfing, streaming, content consuming experience, if you like. And it's a brilliant thing. Not only does it give me additional security when I'm surfing the web, streaming, downloading things, doing my online banking even, it also allows me to change my location with the click of a button, which opens up a whole new world of content. I can watch things that would normally be geo-blocked in this country. I can access services, streaming platforms that would not be available to me otherwise. So that's the big benefit that I love most when it comes to NordVPN, but there are so many more. It's a great service. Make sure you check it out, nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC. If you use that link, which is in the description, you'll get access to a mega discount as well as 4 months for free at the end of your plan. So it's a great deal. If it's something you're interested in, if it's something you think you're going to use, then why not take advantage of this fantastic offer? nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC. We thank them for their support. Okay, let's talk about a few more players. Let's talk Myles Lewis-Skelly. Love him. Absolutely love him. I mean, he went up in my estimations massively the other day at Manchester City when he got involved in the kind of back and forth. It must be all that dark arts training that Mikel Arteta's been delivering, because he seems to have fit right in, which is great to see. The last time I heard this much about the dark arts, I did read this joke, so I'm not going to claim full... well, no, I'm not going to claim any ownership of it, really. I'm not going to claim that I thought of it. Basically, the post that I read was fantastic. It said, the last time I read about or heard about dark arts this much was when Voldemort in Harry Potter attacked the Ministry of Magic, which I thought was just fantastic. But yeah, look, aside from the housery that Myles Lewis-Skelly has shown us in the last week, he clearly has in his locker, I think this guy's just developing into a really, really good footballer. Really, really intelligent footballer. Now, he is a player that started out as a midfielder and may, later on in his career, move back into that area of the park. But Mikel Arteta, when he's used him, has tended to use him as a left fullback. And we know that left fullbacks in this Arsenal team, they do have that license to go into the midfield, and they do have a responsibility to be creators from deep. They do have a responsibility to play a big part in our build-up, and Myles Lewis-Skelly, having that midfield experience behind him and having all the attributes required to be a very good midfielder in the modern game, certainly is well equipped to do that specific role in this Arsenal team. Some of his passing yesterday was great. The way he brought the ball under control at times, the composure he showed, I thought was fantastic. The ball that he played in behind for Raheem Sterling to set up Arsenal's second goal, Ethan Nwaneri's first of the night, yes, was really, really cool. Really, really fantastic. I thought it was a great pass. And it's kind of that typical Arteta thing where it's like fullback comes in, winger goes out, but then makes that run inside. So the wingers are always looking to come off the touchlines under Mikel Arteta, and they've got that ability to go both ways. But you saw that as a clear Mikel Arteta pattern of play. In comes Lewis-Skelly, infield, gets the ball, shifts it back onto the left foot, and threads it through for Raheem Sterling, who put in a great cross, by the way, for Ethan Nwaneri to turn it in. Declan Rice had already given us the lead at that point with his goal from the edge of the box. Good finish. Wasn't quite in the corner, and I think Southwood, the Bolton goalkeeper, when he watches that back, will be quite disappointed, actually, that he didn't keep it out. But at that point, Arsenal were 2 goals to the good, and I really felt that Lewis Skelly was strutting his stuff and playing really, really well. Ethan Nwaneri, who I mentioned there, scored the second goal, also scored Arsenal's third. Declan Rice won the ball back, and as it kind of broke into the path of Ethan Nwaneri, he took over and went and finished it to make it 3. It wasn't the best finish, if we're being honest. Like, a good goalkeeper, that's a bit rude, a bit harsh. A top goalkeeper, in my opinion, saves that. It just seems to squirm underneath the goalkeeper. He'll be really, really disappointed with that one too. But the confidence on Ethan Nwaneri, by the way, to just kind of take the ball off of Declan Rice and say, no, it's mine, and drive into the box and find the back of the net is a real indicator of where this guy is at right now. Somebody asked me the question yesterday, would I be tempted to play him in the Premier League over the next few games in the absence of Martin Odegaard? And the answer is right now, probably not. And I know that people would disagree with that. I'm expecting the live chat to kick off on that one. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong here. I'd love to hear your opinions and views on this. I just think that, we got to be careful with how we frame Ethan Nwaneri's role in this squad, in this team. And it was something that Mikel Arteta said during the radio interviews yesterday that kind of triggered this thought in my mind. I think Ollie Klink, my good friend from TalkSport, said to Mikel Arteta, is there a chance that we could see Ethan Nwaneri now step up in the absence of Martin Odegaard? And Mikel Arteta said it's really important, and you'd have heard this if you listened to our Patreon pod, which you can find on patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna last night. He said that it's important that we don't try and ask players, or we don't ask players essentially to fill the shoes of others. What we should be doing is focusing on their role in the team and what their skill set is and what they can bring to the table. And I thought that was bang on, because it's very, very easy to throw Ethan Nwaneri in and then judge him by the standards that Martin Odegaard has set. And the truth is, as exciting a talent as Ethan Nwaneri is and as good a player as he is, he's not Martin Odegaard yet, nor should he be at 17 years old. They're not at the same level yet. Ethan Nwaneri is a really exciting prospect and someone that I'm incredibly hopeful will go on and achieve big things with Arsenal Football Club. But at the same time, it's unfair to put him, A, in the same bracket as Martin Odegaard right now, and B, to look at him when there's a bunch of senior players in that group that can help us fill that void and say it's your responsibility, young man. Because if he turns up and plays in the Premier League, where the standard is obviously much higher than what he encountered yesterday, and doesn't do it, that's really, really damaging to the young man. Not because Mikel Arteta or Arsenal Football Club are going to lose faith in him, but you know what the reaction's going to be online. You know that he's going to read that stuff. You know that he's going to come across that stuff. And there's a kind of real fine line, in my opinion, between nurturing someone and protecting them, but also making sure they get just enough exposure to the real world so that when they go out into it and they're thrown into the lion's den, they have the resilience to cope with it. And I just don't think putting Ethan Nwaneri in Premier League games right now from the start, he can play a part, he can play a role, of course, but throwing him in from the start and saying, he's my Martin Odegaard replacement, that's too much. It's too much. And I promise you, it will do more damage than good to the young man, because the chances of him being Martin Odegaard levels are really low. And that's because Martin Odegaard is a fantastic player, not necessarily because I don't think Ethan Nwaneri is a good footballer. You got to be patient with these lads. You have to. And I think Mikel Arteta realises that. He's someone that's been criticised in the past, the Arsenal boss, for not giving youth enough of a chance. And yet you could make the case and make the argument that yesterday we were so short that he needed to. And that's kind of why he did it and why it happened and panned out that way. And all of that is valid and fair. But I just think, you've got to find that balance. There's an expectation at Arsenal to win. Martin Odegaard has set the bar in that position. And so anyone that comes in will be judged by his standards. And I just don't feel that it's fair at this stage in his young career to put Ethan Nwaneri in that position and say, you need to do what Martin Odegaard does. And even if you don't think that as the manager, even if as Mikel Arteta sitting in your office, you make that selection knowing full well that it's not going to be like for like, that isn't what the narrative will be. That isn't how most fans will read it. They'll start making those comparisons. And I don't think those comparisons are healthy. Let's go into the live chat and see what you guys are saying on this. Scott says, Arteta has shown a slow and steady approach to developing young players. Works. Saliba's the perfect example of this. Richie says, probably giving him experience by giving him game time as a sub rather than adding pressure starting games. Agreed. Chris says, actually, Harry, I'm with you on this. We have to protect our son. Let's keep grooming him. We need a beast out of him. We need to unravel what he has to offer rather than expect him to be a Mesut, I almost said Mesut Ozil, Martin Odegaard 2.0. Hacker says, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Gunner329 says, I'm happy to be patient with him. Very impressed so far. Rowan says, fully agree. Give the young man time to develop, learn, and become a great future player for us. Raybeam says, a lot of fans want to throw Nwaneri into the deep end, comparing him to Fabregas, but I recall Wenger using him sparingly in the initial stages of his career. Absolutely, he did. He did. And when he did play him, when he did pick him, he made sure that he had tools around him to be able to thrive. And I think that's kind of what Mikel Arteta thought yesterday. This was a big game for Ethan Nwaneri, right? This was a game that had been billed as his game. He was, as I said earlier, the face of the social media posts ahead of the game. He was the one that most people were turning up excited to see, because we've heard so much about this young man. We've seen flashes, we've seen glimpses, but we haven't quite seen enough to make full judgment yet. The excitement is great and all the rest of it, but it felt like there was a pressure on Ethan Nwaneri yesterday to deliver and to perform. So rather than playing Salah Adine in midfield alongside him, which I know a lot of people were calling for, probably more so because they wanted to see Declan Rice protected, that wasn't going to give Ethan Nwaneri the platform he needed to go on and do what he did last night, which was score 2 goals, take another step towards the best 11. I'm not saying he's there yet, but he took another step towards that last night by playing the game, a game that was billed as his game, a game in which he was expected to have an impact. He scores a couple of goals, great, happy days. But does he look as comfortable? Is he able to go and play his game and express himself in the same way without Rice and Jorginho in that midfield? And the answer is no. And this is the thing, when you're trying to blood through talent, you need to find that balance between picking the youthful side that you want, protecting the players that you want to protect. But there's no point throwing these kids in with a load of other kids, and particularly in a situation like this where the midfield is such a vital part of the team and you know that Nwaneri wants that freedom. To put another kid in with him is going to make that much more difficult. So sometimes picking the senior players, it's not just raising the overall level of the team, and it's not just about being fearful of what you do if you leave too many of those key players out. It's actually about creating the platform for someone like Ethan Nwaneri, when he gets his chance, to go out and take it and grab it with both hands. And I feel that's what Mikel Arteta did yesterday with that selection. Because he could have gone with Salah Adine. Probably still would have won the game. But would Ethan Nwaneri have had the night that Ethan Nwaneri had without Declan Rice and Jorginho behind him? Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other players. I do want to talk about Gabriel Jesus. Very workmanlike performance from him. Buzzing around a lot, as he always does. Really ought to have scored at the end of the first half when he dragged that effort wide. I was really disappointed by that because he sort of bumped the defender. He did brilliantly. Does that count as dark arts? Maybe. But he did really, really well. And then he dragged the ball wide. And I thought to myself, you just need a goal. And there's a couple of players in that team, I think, right now that need a goal. He's one of them. Martinelli's another one. Martinelli did get on last night, but obviously didn't get his moment in terms of a real clear-cut goal-scoring chance. But yeah, Jesus, brilliant in terms of holding it up, brilliant in terms of buzzing around, brilliant in terms of going left and right and dragging people out of position. but productivity in and around the penalty box was missing again. And, that's becoming a bit of a common theme with him. And I think that's why people are starting to get a little bit concerned about whether or not we have enough in that area, just generally talking across the squad, for what remains of the season. We've got this incredible defence, which we're kind of really leaning on at the minute in the bigger games. But do we need to pack more of a punch in attack? I think we probably do. And, you're hoping that Raheem Sterling's going to bring some of that as well. We're going to talk about him now. But Jesus certainly has to contribute more than he did last night and has been in recent times. On Raheem Sterling, I thought he started the game not great. There was a couple of things that he tried that didn't really come off. There was the back heel pass that he tried to find Nwaneri with, I think it was. That didn't really work. There was a couple of misplaced passes. There was a couple of take-on attempts that weren't great. There was one, I think I remember, where he just overhit the ball with his touch, and that just allowed the defender to nick it back. So he didn't start the game great, but I think as the game went on, he really, really grew in confidence. And we talked about that Miles Lewis-Skelly pass where we opened up Bolton Wanderers and he put that cross in that Nwaneri then turned in. And I look back at that and I think that was the kind of moment where his confidence levels just shot up. And you kind of need that, I think. When you go to a new club, you're only on loan, right? So in your mind, that is mentally a very, very different thing to process, I think, because you know that it's a short-term thing right now. I don't think there's much scope for that becoming a permanent deal, if I'm being honest with you, because of his age, because of what he's going to want salary-wise, because of what Chelsea are probably going to ask for him. I know it'll be significantly less than maybe what they would have asked in the past because, with a year away, they're probably thinking, well, we kind of got to accept that we're not going to get the money that we want. If he does perform, they'll try and whack their little bit on top, obviously. But I feel like it's a really difficult state of mind to get yourself into. I think when you're a young player and you go out on loan, you're saying, right, let me impress. And the reason I'm here is because this gives me the platform to do just that and exactly that. When you go out on loan as a 28, 29-year-old, it's very, very different. You're going out on loan essentially because you're not wanted by the club that you belong to. And that will be quite difficult for someone like Raheem Sterling, who's always been at the very top of the game, to process. And then you start your Arsenal career and it's been a bit bitty, like, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. And he hasn't massively impressed during those periods of time. Not that it's enough time really for people to draw too many conclusions. But hey, it's 2024. That's what we do. But then he turns up last night and starts the game a little bit shakily, but then grows into it and gets to the point where he's now having a really, really big impact. Now, I know it was against Bolton Wanderers, and I'm not going to be jumping up and down and screaming this was the greatest signing ever. I'm not going to be doing that anytime soon because I'm well aware of what that game was and who we were up against and all the rest of it. But what I will say is this. He then had that confidence to take people on, which he did to great effect, to get to the byline more often. He was heavily involved in Kai Havertz's goal, Arsenal's 5th goal, where he sort of took the ball on from Jesus, danced his way into the box, got a shot off. It was a good save from the keeper, and Havertz was on hand to hook it back into the goal. He scored a goal himself. He's off the mark, which is really, really important when you're an attacking player and you come into a new side. You need to contribute quickly because you get that monkey off your back, and Raheem Sterling did that by scoring yesterday. Probably, by the way, the easiest goal he'll ever score in his career, but still, he'll be delighted with it. He'll be really, really pleased with the fact that he's managed to make that contribution. I think I would have scored it. In fact, by the time I moved my backside, I probably wouldn't have got there ahead of the defender like Sterling did. But in terms of the actual technical ability required to finish that, I think I'd have managed it. But yeah, it's a big moment for him, and hopefully he can kick on and push on. And he's a good addition, and obviously he started the game on the left, but he did spend large periods in the second half on the right. He was effective from the right as well, which I think makes people feel a lot more comfortable about what he can offer us, generally speaking, because I remember when we signed him saying, well, I do think that most of his best work to date has been done on the left, but he can obviously play from the right. And we looked at some clips where he was coming in off that right-hand side and being equally as impactful and devastating. And I think there were a lot of fans that didn't want to buy that, didn't necessarily believe that or feel that that was an accurate representation of what Raheem Sterling can bring. So for him to then go on the right-hand side, albeit against Bolton Wanderers, and do really well and be impactful and score a goal from there and provide what will go down as an assist from there and work the goalkeeper from there, it does make you think, yeah, he's an option on that side of the pitch as well, which is what we really, really need. So, yeah, pleased with his night. Overall, shaky start, but he grew into the game. And you got to remember as well that Raheem Sterling didn't start the season with Chelsea, missed the opening games, has come to us, has trained really, really hard, but has only been able to come on as a late substitute in games, which means that he's not quite at 100% yet, not just mentally in terms of confidence and all the rest of it, but physically as well. And that makes a big difference. It really, really does. Just wanted to wrap up the podcast today by just sharing what Mikel Arteta had to say on a couple of players that were obviously absent yesterday. David Raya, the club confirmed, has a thigh problem. And Mikel Arteta said he's not sure if he's going to be available at the weekend. Not the end of the world because Neto will be available. He's not cup-tied, which is great. So there's a good chance that Neto plays. I think if Raya can get fit, Arsenal obviously will lean on him. He's the number one goalkeeper. There's no debate around it right now. So, yeah, I think Raya will play if he's fit, but Neto could be in line for his first Arsenal appearance and start. White and Timber, both doubts for the weekend. I asked Mikel Arteta about this after the game. You'd have heard it on the Patreon pod. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of Gooner if you're interested in supporting us and getting access to extra content. Check it out. But he said they're both not fit. So we're going to have to wait and see. I suspect that at least one of them will be back. I think that Ben White is the one that I look at and think you're made of real tough stuff and you probably will find a way of getting yourself fit if you can. We left him out of Man City because we were worried about his fitness. He was carrying a bit of an issue. And he came on and did a fantastic job for a long period of time in that game. So, we'll see what happens with regards to those two. Just in reaction to the Carabao Cup draw overall, this is how the draw reads. Brentford will face Sheffield Wednesday at the G-Tech. Southampton will entertain Stoke down on the south coast. Tottenham Hotspur welcome Manchester City to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, I would probably prefer that Manchester City get knocked out because it enhances our chances of winning the competition. But given Ange Postecoglou's told everybody that he doesn't just usually win things in his second season, he always wins things in his second seasons, you can imagine the memes that will be going around when one of only 2 trophies, in my opinion, that Spurs have a chance of winning this season, when they get dumped out of that will be something that goes around, and it'll be a meme that he's created for himself, really. So Tottenham versus Manchester City. AFC Wimbledon or Newcastle will face Chelsea. That'd be a great tie for AFC Wimbledon, wouldn't it? It would be a great tie if it's Newcastle-Chelsea as well. That would be really fascinating. Obviously, AFC Wimbledon have got massive issues with their pitch right now due to some flooding, so hopefully they get that sorted. Manchester United will face Leicester City. Brighton will welcome Liverpool to the Amex. That's another good game. Preston North End versus Arsenal. We travel to Deepdale, as I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the show. Aston Villa take on Crystal Palace in another All-Premier League tie. So it could have been a lot worse for us. But you know what? We deserve that little bit of luck, guys, because we've had some really rotten draws in the domestic cups over the last few seasons. So we'll take it. I'm not going to complain about it. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We'll be back on Friday with a preview of the Leicester City game. Remember, check us out on Patreon. Check out nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC. Get access to your mega discount and 4 months for free if it's a service that you think you'll use. I promise you it's well worthwhile. If you need any help with it, because Wesbird, I think, messaged to say she needs some help, just drop me a DM on Patreon and I'll get back to you on that. Let me know what the issue is and I'll try and help if it's something that you want to sign up to and you're having issues with. What else did I want to say? Thank you all so much again for joining me. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that signed up on Patreon last night, including Richie, who's in the chat. Thank you so much, mate. Really, really appreciate that. We'll be back very, very soon with more. I'm feeling quite relaxed today. I'm feeling quite chill today. Do you know what I think I'm going to do today? Because I haven't got a great deal on. I think I'm going to watch the Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix. Yes, I'm a kid that grew up in the Attitude Era of WWE. And Vince McMahon was quite a character, wasn't he? lots being said about that. I'm interested to watch it. Yeah, there was a time where I'd watch WWE. Not as much as I'd watch the Arsenal, but I was pretty into it, to be fair. Thank you all so much. Let me know your thoughts on last night's game in the comments section, and I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great Thursday. Goodbye.